Hi, you are watching Mcaster. Get ready for an amazing story.
Let us start the story with this guy. He who is uncontrollable.
A swordmaster who never wants to leave his room. He's a man out of his mind. He is Count Perdium's useless oldest son, Gislen Perdium. We see the man that he is fighting asking how he, the best knight of the north, was defeated by that garbage human being. Gislen asks him if he finds it warm and cozy, saying he put a lot of money into making that trap. Bro has a cold-ass walkout, and he glares at him, asking if he likes it. His enemy says there's no way he's the garbage, and Gislen asks him how he knew of his plans beforehand. Gislen says not just that, he also knew how many of them there were, who the spies were, and who helped him with the reinforcements. He knew everything from the start and played it in the palm of his hand. The man gets angry, saying there's no way, and he's always been a hidden ace card, asking how a useless piece of like him could dare to mess with him. But he gets interrupted by getting kicked straight in the face as Gislen tells him to shut it. He says to try invading however many times you want. He's going to be the one to win the war after that, every single time without fail. He takes off his helmet and asks if he knows why that is. He says it's because he has all of the plans. It jumps to a year ago in the Luya Kingdom, near the Pum estate. Gislen is looking at his hand, all shaky, and asks what just happened. He reaches for his throat, surprised that he's alive. He says there's no way. Just a while ago, he was killed. We see his sword get sent flying through the air mid-combat by his enemy. He says and we see him get cut straight across the chest like Zorro, but he was already bleeding pretty heavily. He falls to his knees, and a red-haired knight says this is how it ends. Gislen Perdium, the mercenary king and one of the continent's 7 strongest men, has lost to none other than one of the continent's top 7 noble knights named Eden. He says the war is over and asks Gislen if he has any last words. Gislen says none. It's just a shame that he was unable to fulfill his revenge and wishes that Eden would just die here. Eden sighs, calling him arrogant, saying that he didn't expect him to have been the oldest son of the fallen Perdium household. He recalls him leaving his family after his sister died. Gislen asks how he knows that when he's from a different kingdom. Idun says of course he knows that because he worked his ass off to try to track him down. They were the ones who worked with the Delphine household to bring down his family. Gislen hears the words and realizes there were other people besides the Duke Delian household that planned his downfall. Eden puts his blade to his throat, saying there's no point in explaining further since he's going to be dead soon and that he should just accept his fate. Gislen yells, calling him a bastard, saying that he'll never forgive him, and Eden says he doesn't care, then swings his sword, cutting Gislen's head clean off, causing his blood to fly through the air. Gislen explains that he was decapitated at that moment, yet here he is with his head still on his shoulders. He wonders if that was all a hallucination as he is his younger self. He wonders if maybe he was taken captive and used as a lab rat for the mages. These arrogant bastards will regret having kept him alive. Somebody calls out to him, calling him young master, and Gislen turns. We are introduced to one of the Perdium soldiers named Ricardo, who says that he needs Gislen to come out because he knows he's awake. Gislen instantly tells him to just be quiet and puts his blade to his throat, saying he'll let him live if he answers his questions, or maybe not. He begins to release killing intent. Ricardo is confused, asking him what's going on, saying this is crossing a line and that no means no. Gislen wonders what's the deal with his reaction, since he's being threatened, asking what he's talking about. Ricardo pushes him away, saying he tired himself out from his tantrum earlier and fell asleep. Gislen asks what he's talking about, and Ricardo asks him if he forgot everything after taking a nap, saying that he was throwing a tantrum about how he was going to command the group to raid the orcs. Gislen is confused, asking what kind of nonsense this is, and Ricardo says that he needs to get his together as people are waiting on them. Gislen asks where they are going, and Ricardo says, of course, to the Pum estate. Gislen is surprised by this and grabs Ricardo's shoulder, telling him to say that again. Ricardo asks what's wrong, but Gislen presses him further, asking if he means the fallen Pum estate. At the top of the cliff, we see Gislen looking over at the Pum estate. Gislen is surprised, saying it really is his house, and he wonders how it's still standing as he saw it reduced to ashes in the past. Ricardo asks him if he had a nightmare or something, saying that if he calls his own household fallen, it's too much, and he will get kicked out if the Count hears that. Gislen pinches his cheek, asking if he is dreaming, but says that hurts, so never mind. He has a younger face, and his estate is in its original state. That means he has traveled back to the past, or perhaps an alternate timeline. His younger self resided in the household, and his immaturity was born from feeling inferior. As more time passed, more people from the household avoided him. He was unable to withstand the criticism and ran away from home. Several years after that, he became a mercenary. He survived countless battles, building up his skills and made a name for himself. He returned to the Perdium country in order to make up for his past mistakes, but all that was waiting for him was the remains of his family's household. He lost everything. But right now, it's all still here. All the people he holds dear are still alive as well. He begins to smile, saying he can't believe it, and he wants to sing a song of joy, but it's too early to rejoice. He recalls Ricardo mentioning the raid about the orcs. He can't forget that day. This is the day that most people in the raid squad will die brutally to the orcs. In his past life, he had followed the orc raid squad in an attempt to make a name for himself. At that time, the report said there were only 3 orcs. He thought that would be easy enough for somebody like him who had no experience commanding a squad. But when they got there were more than 20 orcs. Almost everybody ended up dying because he had been stubborn and wanted to command them all. It should be doable enough since these orcs didn't really have a strategy. The problem is if these guys will trust him since they all think he's a useless bastard. Suddenly, they hear something being thrown overhead as one of their defense fortresses just gets sent flying across the ground in front of them. Some soldiers scream that it's the orcs, and that they are here. Giant reddish orcs charge straight in. Ghislain asks if they got here this fast in his past life too. The orcs are absolutely destroying them, and there seems to be no chance of winning. Plot armor needs to kick in because he's about to die again in his second life. A man yells in a panic, saying everyone needs to get into formation and not panic. Ironically, the man is the raid squad commander, Skovin. An orc swings its blade at him, and Skovin narrowly avoids it. Skovin says they let their guard down, and getting ambushed was something they weren't prepared for. There are way more orcs than what was reported, and at this rate, they are all going to die. Ghislain calls out to Skovan, who turns confused, and tells him to watch behind as an orc comes in for a surprise attack. Ghislain quickly dashes in, heading straight toward Skovan, putting his arm on Skovan's shoulder and throwing him out of the way of the attack. Skovan is confused and wonders why Ghislain is sacrificing himself for him. But he's mistaken, as Ghislain stabs his blade straight through the orc's hand, cutting its arm and leg clean in half. Everyone is speechless as the orc screams and falls to the ground, crushing it beneath its massive size. Ghislain cleans his blade from the blood, saying he guesses he can't use mana, and wishes he had returned to the past earlier. He walks over to Skovin, asking if he's the commander. Skovin is still confused, and Ghislain tells him to give it. Skovin asks what he's talking about, and Ghislain says he wants the commander rights. Skovin wonders what Ghislain means by the right to command, saying he knows he's an idiot, but to ask for this when everyone's lives are on the line is too much. Skovin stands up, telling Ghislain that he can't, and walks away, asking if Ghislain thinks this is some kind of game. Even if he is the young master, he cannot give up the authority that the Lord gave him that easily. Ghislain says this is annoying, though he would have reacted the same way if an idiot had come up to him and asked for the right to command. Another orc comes in to avenge his fallen brother, and Skovan tells Ghislain to fall back as he'll take care of things. Did bro just forget what just happened? Ghislain says he has no choice, raising his sword and throwing it, almost hitting Skovan in the back. Skovan grabs him by the collar and asks what he thinks he's doing. He hears the sound of something getting stabbed behind him and pauses, turning around to see an orc with a sword through its forehead towering above him. The orc grunts before falling backward, dead on the floor. Skovin is confused, wondering how he hit the orc's weak spot. Ghislain asks if Skovin knows the most important thing in battle. All the men are terrified, hiding behind their shields. Ghislain says there's no hope in winning a battle when their troops are filled with fear. They have to gain momentum to win. Ghislain pulls his blade out of the orc's head and dashes through the debris of the tower, leaping through the air straight above the charging orcs. He lands, stabbing one of them through the head in front of everyone. Skovin can't believe what he's seeing. Ghislain pulls out his blade, stepping on one of the orcs, and tells the others to come at him, saying he'll kill them all. The orcs charge, but Ghislain does the same thing, cutting off one's arm, then quickly dodging the swings of 2 more before cutting their heads off. Skoven wonders if he's dreaming, as even a mana user like himself struggles. So how is this skinny young man doing all of this? Ghislain gasps for breath. He's clearly tired, but his movements are minimal, dodging attacks and using his swordsmanship to strike at their weak spots like a master swordsman, or perhaps something even greater. Ghislain yells, asking if this is all they have, saying he's not even warmed up yet, and they're not living up to their reputation as a warrior species. As he starts to turn, the soldiers realize that they're all charging at Ghislain and wonder if he's running away. The men then call out to Skoven, who stands there lost in thought as he can't tell what Ghislain is thinking. Drawing their attention was great, but running away now, in that direction. He recognizes it as the edge of a cliff towards the Pum estate. He then thinks about it, the fact that it's a cliff, and begins to sweat nervously, saying, "There is no way." He yells at all of his men to raise a shield wall as they'll follow the first son into battle. As all of the orcs are charging straight behind Ghislain, he says that he's sure Skoven has already realized what his plans are, if he's a skilled commander. Although Ghislain would prefer to slice all of them down by himself, his poor stamina won't be able to handle that. But this should be enough for Skoven to manage, as Ghislain smirks. As the orcs are keeping Ghislain at the edge of the cliff, they hear the sound of charging behind and all turn, wondering what it is, only to see Skoven and the men pulling up with their shields and spears. Ghislain grins, saying, "This is perfect." He jumps backward off of the cliff, saying, "Now is the time." Skoven yells, telling the troops to push the orcs off the cliff, and they begin to charge at them while the orcs have nowhere to go. They make contact, and the men start to scream, pushing with all their might. The orcs actually do fall off the cliff, and we see Ghislain has stuck his sword into the cliffside. The orcs hit the ground, dying from the fall. "Should have had a water bucket," someone jokes. All the men are gassed out, saying they actually managed to kill all the orcs. Skoven yells, calling out for Ghislain, and looks over the edge to see him still holding onto the wall. Ghislain grins, but Skoven didn't expect him to survive. Smiling, Skoven reaches out his hand to Ghislain, telling him to grab it. But Ghislain releases his sword, saying that he can't, and begins to lose strength as he falls down the cliff. Neither Skoven nor the men expected this. Neither did I. While falling, Ghislain dreams. He hears a little girl calling out to him. We learn it's his sister, Elena, and he starts to think about his memories with her. They used to be close, but over time their relationship turned sour as his attitude worsened. She eventually grew to loathe him. Ghislain sees these memories as fragments and holds on to one, saying these are his memories of Elena. He then hears her voice, pulling him back. She's grabbing his arm, with tears in her eyes, saying, "Let's go together." Suddenly, his eyes open wide, and he looks up at the ceiling, realizing he's back indoors. He looks at his hands, thinking, "It looks like they actually managed to save me." He wonders what that weird dream was, and starts to feel severe muscle soreness all over his body. He figures it must be a consequence of pushing himself to the limit, but he takes comfort in knowing he's still alive. A woman opens the door, calling out to him, saying he's awake. She seems happy, holding a bucket of water. We learn her name is Belinda. She sighs, asking if he knows how worried she was, reminding him that she told him to let the soldiers handle the orcs. Ghislain jumps out of bed and hugs her tightly. She asks what he's doing and if she did something wrong. He says no, he's just glad to see her. We learn that she was his personal tutor since he was little, the only one who continued to stay by his side despite his reckless antics. After his family fell into ruin and she disappeared, he never expected to see her again. She wonders why he's acting so strangely since they see each other every day. Ghislain realizes he needs to tell her the truth, so he says, "A catastrophe will soon strike Pum." She wonders what he means, and Ghislain tries to explain that he died and came back to life. She sarcastically replies, "Sure, and I bet the orcs almost killed you." She then tells him that rather than Pum, it's him that's in greater danger. She continues to scold him, and he thinks this approach isn't working. She asks what he was planning to do if he was too hurt to attend the festival. This reminds Ghislain about the festival that always takes place around this time of year. Belinda asks if he's already forgotten that Lady Elena has been waiting for the chance to go to the festival with him. It would be a great opportunity for them to grow closer again. Ghislaine recalls how, in his past life, he didn't have time to enjoy such things because of his trauma. He asks how long until the festival, and Belinda tells him he has about a week left. Ghislaine is surprised it's so close. Suddenly, his sister, Elena, asks if he's inside as she enters the room. Ghislaine reflects that the day is soon coming, a day that changed his life and continues to haunt him. He quickly hugs Elena, surprising both her and Belinda. Elena gets flustered, asking what kind of prank this is. Ghislaine tells her, "I've missed you." She shoves him away, saying he's creeping her out, and Ghislaine marvels at her strength. Elena asks what game he's playing, wondering if he thinks this makes everything okay. He says he has no idea what she's talking about. She mentions that he told her to piss off because she's annoying, and that he thinks she's disgusting too. He can't believe he said all of that. He explains that he wasn't close to her in his past life and admits he was a complete piece of... He apologizes to her, and both Belinda and Elena can't believe that he apologized first. They ask Ghislaine if the ORCs hurt his head, and he says no, that he dealt with them himself, asking why they keep implying it was him who got hit. His DOMs then come back, and he falls to the floor. In a sarcastic tone, Elena says, "Yeah, right, you totally dealt with them." And both she and Belinda start laughing. He can't believe they're having such a wholesome moment. He smiles, saying everybody's the same as he remembers them. He wonders why the past him wasted so much time on useless things. Next week, there's a festival. He had rejected Elena's offer to go together, making an excuse that the events from the raid squad upset him. That was the last time he ever saw her. Her body was later found shredded to pieces, along with her guards, and he regretted that moment every day for the rest of his life. Someone knocks, asking if they can come in. It's Elena's guards, Jamal and Philip. She asks why they came in, saying she told them to wait outside. Jamal apologizes, explaining that the servants asked her to oversee their work on the festival supplies. Ghislaine asks why they would even need Elena for that. Belinda responds, saying he wouldn't know because he's always lazy. She asks if he knows there's a shortage of workers. He asks if it's so low that even Elena has to work right now. He didn't take care of these things back then, so of course he wouldn't know. He tells his sister he would like to help her. She looks back at him in disbelief, and both she and Belinda are shocked. Outside, multiple vendors are setting up for the festival. Ghislaine is yelling, saying he said he'd help. Elena tells him to go away, as people will be too scared to work with him around. She shoves him, and he asks if this is really how she should treat someone who wants to help. He explains that her body was found near the slums, far from the festival grounds, and that someone must have called her out there or forcibly moved her there. To prevent this, he needs to know the ins and outs of the castle. A man quickly runs over, calling out to Ghislaine. Ghislaine is surprised. It's a knight named Fergus. Fergus says that this lowly servant has made his way over as soon as he heard about the news of the ORCs. He begins to cry, but Ghislaine tells him they can stop talking about it now. Elena laughs, saying great timing, noting that he's acting weird after waking up. She asks Fergus to take Ghislaine back to his room, and he agrees. Ghislaine says it can't be helped, and that he'll get to know what's going on around the castle better next week. He mentions an abandoned training field in the castle, and tells Fergus to take him there. Fergus asks for what reason, and Ghislaine says to train, asking what other reason he would need. Fergus is surprised, but guides him over quickly. When they arrive, Ghislaine can't believe the field's condition. It's perfectly maintained, despite being abandoned. He remarks that it's a great place to train and that he never saw anything like it as a mercenary. Fergus explains that they kept it maintained in case he ever wished to use it, and believes Ghislaine's current behavior is just a phase of not wanting to train. Ghislaine wonders if Fergus took this much care of the field in his past life, and he begins to regret how he acted. He tells Fergus he needs to live a long life, because dying is painful. Fergus comments that it sounds like Ghislaine has already experienced death. Ghislaine smirks, saying that Fergus is sharp, he actually did die and resurrect. Fergus suspects brain damage. Ghislaine then says Fergus can head back, as he's going to start training. Fergus tells him that he'll wait outside. In his past life, Ghislaine treated everyone around him like enemies, but he now realizes how short-sighted he was. He reflects on the fact that he only has a week to prepare. Back then, it was revealed that the one behind Elena's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. Her death led to a war that brought ruin to his house. He realizes that to change the course of events, he needs to fix things from here on out. First things first, he needs to improve his physique. While time is short, he should at least be able to control mana. Mana is a supernatural resource that allows humans to surpass their limits. Most say that noticing and absorbing mana is the hardest part, but he was able to do it even on the battlefield. He needs to connect the mana particles in the air, bundling them up like spinning a spool. For someone like him, who has experienced thousands of battles, creating a mana core is easy, but that's not all. With a method from an old half-buried book, he can surpass the natural human limit by creating multiple cores, stacking them to form a connected mesh of power, generating explosive force. His nose and mouth begin to bleed, and he says that 3 is his limit. We learn that he actually achieved 5 in his past life. This method allows one to create an explosive force in a short time, but it also requires an extremely large amount of mana. In return, that was the primary reason he lost to Eden in his past life, bringing a whole KN order to fight against him when he had already run out of mana. This left him with nothing to do in retaliation, and he definitely would have won if it was a fair fight. He says it is an inherently unstable technique, but this is enough for now. Now he has a youthful body and a lot of time, and he will make sure to enact revenge on Idun, even on those bastards standing behind House Delhi who helped destroy his country. He vows to get revenge on every single one of them. It jumps to a week later, to the day of the festival. There are fireworks in the sky. Ghislain is putting on his belt, and even putting some stuff into his belt pockets. He starts heading to the festival to meet with his sister. She is surprised that he actually came and asks what happened, saying he never used to do these sorts of things. He says that as a Perdium, he should at least come to festivals every once in a while. She tells him that he has been acting really weird recently, and she has heard that he's done nothing but training for the past week. He asks what is so wrong with the next in line of a night family training. She is confused, saying that he didn't care about these kinds of things just the other week. He was the one who said Dad was annoying, and that he wished he was the Lord already. She laughs, saying that she likes the way things are now, and it seems like the old him is back. She smiles brightly. Ghislain looks over at her and says that he realized something in the past week. Because his actions have changed, his perception of the future is slowly beginning to change as well. The general flow of things might be the same, but it is difficult to gauge the impact of his actions on small events. Some butterfly effect type of Bayunaishari. Making good use of the information from the future is his job, and he needs to respond to each situation effectively. His preparations are now complete, so he starts to enjoy his night at the festival with his sister. We see them trying some bread, and then she carries him to the next stall. This probably happened quite a few times. Finally, she says that was a lot of fun, but it's getting a little boring with it being the same every year, asking why there's nothing new. Ghislain says the festival is almost over, but nothing's happened, and he wonders if it's because he's with Elena. Jamal then asks if she wants to check out the other areas. Ghislain thinks this might be it. He says that according to a friend of his, there are new events elsewhere, asking if she wants to check them out too. Jamal starts to take Elena away. She says this better be fun. Ghislain then says it must have been these two, the traitors of his house, both Jamal and Philip. We learn that Jamal and Philip were the most trusted knights in the feud because they had protected Elena ever since she was a child. It was known that they were murdered while protecting Elena in his past life, but now he knows differently. He decides to follow them. Jamal says, "Now we're here," showing Elena an empty area in the slums. Elena looks around, asking what this is, saying there's nothing here, and wondering if they are sure there will be a performance in such a dirty place. Jamal looks nervous, saying he guesses they are not prepared yet and thinks that they will be here soon. She barks at him, saying not to make her laugh and asking who would perform here. Ghislain looks around, saying as expected, this may seem like a simple deserted street at first sight, but looking at the placement of the obstacles blocking the escape routes, they must have made preparations in advance. Elena starts driving, begging him, saying it's time to go. Jamal tries to tell her to wait, saying that she should at least see the show since she's already here. She says no, she doesn't want to stay in such a filthy place. Ghislain asks if she works out or something, asking why she's so strong, which annoys her. Then Philip stands in her way, blocking her, and makes a very angry expression, saying they should wait a little more. She gets scared by him and says that they are acting strange today, asking what's going on. Jamal says he's sorry and didn't mean to scare her. It's just that a reasonable request came in, and he begins to rub his hands together. She asks what he means by request. Then somebody else begins to approach with two men. His name is Frank, and he says, as expected, their work process is clean. Jamal says, of course, and that they brought the young lady as promised, so they should end the deal here. Frank then spots Sline, saying he doesn't think he requested him to be here too. Elena is clearly scared. Jamal says that he'll hand him over for free, saying he followed them foolishly, not knowing that this would be his graveyard. Ghislaine then calls Jamal out for selling them, asking if he really thinks he can get away with this. Jamal laughs, asking why he's not worrying about himself instead, saying that all they have to do is run away to a faraway place. They were getting sick and tired of this impoverished land anyways, and he's sure there are plenty of others leaving Perdium besides them. He laughs in a condescending way. Before he can even react, Ghislaine swings his blade, slicing him across the chest. By the time Jamal realizes it, it's too late. As Philip begins to spit out blood, he realizes they might have bitten off more than they can chew. Jamal's corpse falls to the ground, split in two. At the very least, the barbarians never sold them out. Ghislaine glances back at Philip, unleashing his mana, and asks if he agrees. Philip grabs Elena, calling Jamal an idiot and questioning how a knight could lose to an amateur. Before he can draw his blade, Ghislaine's sword lodges in his head. Philip utters impossible as his final words before collapsing, dead on the ground. A henchman asks if that's really the eldest son of Pum, commenting that he had no combat training. Frank confirms it, saying that despite being taken off guard, Ghislaine instantly killed two knights using mana-powered attacks. Elena hugs Philip's body, crying, and asks what is happening. Ghislaine, realizing what he must do, knocks her out with a chloroform trick, telling her to rest. Frank thanks Ghislaine for handling things, remarking that Ghislaine is much different than what they'd heard, and that they were planning to deal with the knights themselves. He asks if Ghislaine has been hiding his true skills. Ghislaine, sensing a fight, realizes there are three opponents. The two beside Frank seem weak, but Frank exudes a lot of mana. Knowing he must act quickly, Ghislaine forms mana strings around his hand and asks Frank who ordered this attack. Frank responds, saying there's no need for a dead man to know. The henchman suggests cutting off Ghislaine's head, but Frank insists they capture him alive and break every limb so that he suffers in agony. Frank's men charge toward Ghislaine. Calmly, Ghislaine pulls a firecracker from his belt, throws it into the air, and catches them off guard. He uses the distraction to stab one of the men between the eyes, killing him instantly. The other henchman mocks the trick, coming in for a counterswing. Ghislaine blocks it behind his back, then wraps his arm around the man's blade, rotating his hips to disarm him. In one smooth motion, Ghislaine decapitates the man. Sensing another attack from above, Ghislaine blocks it with his sword behind his back once again, surprising Frank with the precision. Pivoting off his foot, Ghislaine slices diagonally upwards toward Frank, narrowly missing his throat, but causing Frank to drop his pipe. Frank launches a follow-up attack from above, but Ghislaine blocks it using both swords. Frank expresses surprise, saying that if Ghislaine's mana were weaker, he would have been beheaded. Ghislaine wonders how Frank survived the strike to his neck, guessing that Frank concentrated his mana there. Frank, puzzled, remarks that he doesn't know how Ghislaine mastered such strange swordsmanship, but insists that Ghislaine will die here. As Frank charges in again, infusing his blade with mana, he mocks Ghislaine, saying that Ghislaine's weak mana is no match for him. Despite being pushed back, Ghislaine grins, unsettling Frank. Suddenly, Ghislaine deflects Frank's sword, stabs his own blades into the ground for stability, and kicks Frank hard in the face, knocking him back. Frank coughs up blood, confused by the sudden change in Ghislaine's strength. He realizes that Ghislaine's attacks have become more powerful than expected. Ghislaine, now glowing with red mana, reveals that he knows the truth about Elena's death and unleashes his third core of mana. Frank, shocked by the power surge, questions how Ghislaine could increase his mana so drastically. Ghislaine isn't interested in talking. He closes in on Frank, attacking relentlessly. Frank, struggling to block the strikes, begins to feel his hands numb and his sword starts to crack under the pressure. Frank, terrified, mutters that he's never heard of a technique that boosts mana this explosively. It's as if Ghislaine has become an entirely different person, channeling the power of the mercenary king from his past life. Ghislaine's final blow shatters Frank's sword, and the fear on Frank's face is reflected in Ghislaine's blade. Ghislaine slices Frank across the chest, and as Frank spits out blood, Ghislaine pins him against a wall, pressing his forearm to Frank's throat. Ghislaine, coldly, tells Frank that he'd like to finish their conversation before ending him. He asks Frank who was the one who requested this and begins to twist the blade in his stomach. Frank pulls out a hidden blade, saying he's not going to go down easily and that he'll at least take Elena with him. He flicks his wrist, going to throw the dagger, but we see mana strings wrap around it. And this is what Ghislaine expected in the first place. Bro was ready for everything, and he says it's time to make a deal. Frank shouldn't try to say anything useless and should answer his questions. Then he'll sheath his blade. Frank says that he can't move because these threads are created with mana and wonders when this happened. He realizes it must have been from the start, understanding he's been played. Ghislaine then says he's sure someone of Frank's caliber would know how to patch himself up, though that wouldn't matter if he destroyed his mana core. As Ghislaine begins to imbue his aura into the blade, Frank looks down, scared. He starts to feel a vibrating sensation in his stomach. His core begins to shatter, causing his mana to scatter. As this happens, Frank asks if Ghislaine is out of his mind, saying one wrong move with the mana's backflow could cause an explosion and blow the whole area away. He asks if Ghislaine is planning to self-destruct. Ghislaine says that's for the unskilled and he can manage it. Frank realizes that Ghislaine is not bluffing and that he's serious. He sees the reflection of death in Ghislaine's eyes. Frank screams, saying it was Count Desmond who requested this. He needed a pretext to start a war against the PM and Darda families. Ghislaine asks if that's so and reflects. In his previous life, such underground work was left for the family's ally with the Ducal house. He can't believe that Duke Delphine would do this without even trying to hide it. Now he understands why they wanted to kill Elena. Frank pants, confirming it, and Ghislaine shoves the blade completely through Frank's stomach. Frank asks what he's doing, saying this is different from what he said earlier. Ghislaine asks what's wrong, saying Frank has killed plenty of people in his time. Yet now he's scared when it's his turn. Frank begins to laugh, saying nothing will change even if Ghislaine kills him. He's already finished the work for Darda. He asks if people would listen to a punk like Ghislaine, and declares that Perdium will perish due to the war. Ghislaine puts his hand on Frank's face, saying he'd like to tell him something. He says that he was reborn after dying, and will make sure things are different this time. Ghislaine begins to twist the blade further, completely shattering Frank's core. At the same time, a firework is shot into the sky, and we hear it explode, just like what happened to Frank. The walls are painted with his blood. Ghislaine begins to pant, looking around at the corpses he left behind. He turns his head to make sure Elena is still asleep, which she is. He sighs with relief, drops his blade to the ground, and is just glad that this is finally over. Then, he starts to feel the recoil and begins to spit up blood, causing him to fall to the floor. He says that exploding 3 cores wasn't an issue back when he was the mercenary king, but he refuses to fall like this. He forces himself into a nearby house. He says that in his previous life, they found another body besides Elena, and given what the guy said earlier about the Darda family, there must be a clue under some debris. We see that it is none other than the son of Darda, dead, killed along with his escort knight. This is how they silenced them and framed them as Elena's killers. The moment this is revealed, the war will start. Ghislaine decides to hide the evidence by pulling out a firecracker and burning the place down, saying he will not let things happen as planned. He leaves carrying Elena, while someone watches from the treetops, vanishing instantly after witnessing it all. We then jump to a Scovane where someone says, "It was a failure." We see the person who vanished earlier. They are talking about how they sent guard knights and Frank, the best they had, yet they couldn't take care of one girl. They ask if they let their guard down because they thought it was easy work. Someone in the middle says it was all due to Ghislaine Pum. The others ask how that makes sense, calling Ghislaine a useless bastard of the North. They express doubt, saying they're sure he's a worthless piece of trash and asking if the speaker is really trying to use him as an excuse. The person nervously says that Ghislaine was completely different from the information and rumors they had about him. He describes Ghislaine's brutal murders, how skilled he was in defeating all the enemies without wasting any movements, and how he was always a step ahead, like a completely different person. They mention that they've already taken care of things with Darda, so it shouldn't be an issue to proceed. But the others scold the speaker, saying he couldn't even find out information on one kid and ask how much of a setback this was. They all yell that this guy needs to die right here and now. One person speaks up, telling everyone to be quiet, and the room instantly falls silent as they all look up at a throne. The man in the middle says that he will personally get rid of Ghislaine Pum. When asked how, he says that he will make a duel happen naturally, and there is someone he has in mind. When they ask who, he says it's someone named Cain Loges. Cain is famous for his strength-based swordsmanship despite his young age. He is the epitome of strength, and there is no one in the north who can match him. Plus, Cain is Ghislaine's cousin, so it won't be too forced to have them meet. The man on the throne says that if Cain fails, there will be no next time, and Ghislaine's blue Ghislaine will end with him. The man says he will not disappoint him. Back at the training hall, Fergus enters, telling Ghislaine that it's approaching mealtime. As a string of aura flies past him, grabbing Ghislaine's sword's handle off the wall, he looks at it and it begins to fly straight back toward Ghislaine. He catches it in his hands, blows his breath, and starts swinging around, saying that should do. Then he spots Fergus, and Fergus says that he can't help but feel so focused on his training. Asking what he did just now, he sees his sword dangling off the thread and realizes he's using Mona like a string. In his past life, Ghislaine used it all the time, but at his current skill level, he needs to employ his core to use it like he used to. Due to his lacking mana, however, if he just makes one thread to use less mana, he can still have it despite having less. Fergus says he thought he had trained his mana for a long time, but he's never seen anything like this. Just a while ago, Ghislaine didn't use mana, let alone train, so how was he able to come up with an idea like this? Ghislaine cuts his thoughts short, asking if he wanted something. Fergus says he just wanted to stop by to tell him something, and Ghislaine asks what it is. Fergus bows, saying he wanted to thank him for protecting the young lady. Ghislaine asks why he's thanking him, saying it was something he should have done naturally. They should go eat. A few days later, the festival was paused, but it only made sense as a guard knight tried to traffic the young lady. We see her sitting in her room, pouting, asking why everybody thinks she's lying when she tells them Ghislaine was the one who saved her, and that Ghislaine should go say something to them. Ghislaine says it's fine as they won't believe him anyway. Belinda is just pissed that Jamal and Philip tried to get rid of her, calling them perverts. Ghislaine says they're just happy that Elena lived, saying he's able to stop the war from happening, but he's sure they won't give up. He can't stop them on his own forever, so he needs to grow a military force. Another maid enters the room bringing food, and Ghislaine gets ready for his meal, saying he has to get more into politics to do that. We see a single piece of bread on the plate, and Ghislaine looks down, confused, asking Belinda why they are only getting desserts. She says surely he didn't forget how the situation was. We then hear somebody screaming, "Compensate!" out the window, and it is a big chungus of a villager saying they need to be compensated for the damages caused by the cancellation of the festival. They're barging at the gates. It's a bunch of villagers. The guards try to get them to calm down, and Ghislaine looks out the window, asking what's going on. Belinda says she knew this would happen, and surely he knows that their county is full of merchants who make a living from the profits that come from the festival. It was good enough for them last year, but since the festival was cancelled after only one day, it makes sense they are upset. Ghislaine didn't think their county situation was this bad, and he says this isn't good. They will only get more aggressive if he doesn't do anything. He asks Fergus what the soldiers are doing, telling them to go calm the crowd down. Fergus says they don't have any. Ghislaine asks what he means. Fergus explains that most of them have been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters where the orcs came from for reconstruction because of the raid. Perdium is basically eternally at war because of the barbarians in the north, and on the other side, there is the Forest of Monsters from where the orcs came from originally. Ghislaine clicks his tongue, saying they have no money or soldiers, and this is a mess. He tells Belinda he would like to have a private conversation. He says she's the one who manages his money and they should use that to calm down the merchants. She laughs, saying there isn't any, and he asks why not. She reminds him that the Count cut off his allowance because he spent money like water. He can't believe he's broke and tells her to lend him money. She tells him she doesn't have any either. Ghislaine sits by the window saying, "Damn it, I have no money or soldiers," and that he pretty much has nothing. Without even the least amount of money, there's nothing he can do, even if he has knowledge about the future. He needs to get his money up. He wonders if there is no way, and if there's surely something on the estate that's worth a lot. We see Ricardo, after a while, calling out to Ghislaine. He asks why he's here in such a hurry, and Ricardo says that there is a problem as young Master C wishes to meet him.
We'll end the video here for now.
Thank you for watching. We're hoping for your support. Please don't forget to subscribe.